Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. This is Rachel Grant. Welcome again to another episode of Real Talk with Rachel. So glad that you're here with us tonight. And I'm going to be speaking tonight with author Jori Nunes and her novel, Chocolate Flowers. While it's a disturbing tale based on true actual events, it's a powerful, amazing story. And I have to tell you, I just picked it up and couldn't put it down. And I know, reading through this story, there were moments of shock, there were moments of tears, moments of laughter, and just really one of those books that's all about understanding this silent worldwide crisis of mentally disturbed sexual offenders of children and the devastating effects of child emotional abuse, neglect, sexual molestation, and it really is about bringing hope and awareness to prevent future abuse. We all know the statistics that are out there. 1 in 5 children have been reported as being sexually assaulted by the age of 15, and oftentimes by a person that wasn't a stranger. So, Jori's novel, while heart-wrenching and raw and is no holds barred, is really about that story of abuse and falling down, but getting back up again and fighting for oneself and for the ones we love. So tonight, Jori's going to share with us, her story and how she coped when she discovered her son was being abused by a trusted friend, and just all along the way how she's, come through her journey. And if we have time in the show, we'll leave a little room for question and answers in case you have that and have something that you want to either ask Jori or something that you want to share as a result of hearing her story tonight. So I'm really, really excited. And just as a reminder, in case this is the first time you're joining us, I am a sexual abuse recovery coach and work with survivors who are sick and tired of feeling broken and unfixable, and I help them let go of the pain of abuse and really move on with their lives. And part of that journey for me is definitely bringing authors like Jori to this space and giving them an opportunity to share, what it is that they've been through and how they've overcome. So welcome, Jori.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and I especially appreciate anyone who took the time to listen in tonight, because I know this topic is not an easy one to listen to or talk about, so thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jori, I would love for us to get started today just by, reading an excerpt from your book.
Okay.
Do you have a little piece there that you can share with us?
I would, and I want you to know it's a really tough book to find parts that I could read publicly, knowing there could be children listening. So I don't feel like this is something you have to turn off a speaker for. It should be appropriate. However, this book is not for children, so I just want to stress that so parents can be aware of that. This is just from page 55, which is probably in the 6th chapter. Probably middle in the book. It says, Mother would brag, "Isn't your sister's body perfect?" Of course, I would have to agree. Her body was perfect. She was tall, tan, and had long, beautiful blonde hair. Mother had her lie on a beach towel on the front lawn in her various bikinis. Mother watched from the window as men would slowly drive by, or a guy on his bike would fall off as he stared at her. Mother got excited and went outside with drinks for my sister and a special spray bottle filled with baby oil to keep my sister's tan as dark as possible. I sat by the window and watched my mother cater to my sister. She invited me over for a closer look. One day, a man knocked at the door and introduced himself to my mother as Keith Smith. He claimed to be a top-producing photographer interested in taking professional modeling photos of the model on the bikini in the front lawn. She will have to take a trip with me during the summer to Hawaii. where we will photograph other top models, he explained. It'll only be a week. Mother agreed in excitement as Keith handed her his business card. Mother also insisted he stayed for dinner so he could properly be introduced to Tasha. Mother walked Keith to the door with a great big smile and said, "See you tonight, son," in a flirty way. She shut the door. Keith then spent the next few minutes staring adoringly at my sister and admiring her in her bikini as she laid on the towel. Then he got in his fancy red sports car and raced off. Mother happily opened the front door and called my sister into the house to inform her that she had to shower and get ready for her date with Keith. "You mean that old fat man who was staring at me just now? Now, Tasha, you need to think of it more like a rich, successful man who's going to take you to Hawaii and turn you into a supermodel." Tasha and Mother went back and forth as they argued over the age difference of 20-plus years and Tasha's tender age of 13. Mother insisted Tasha be on her very best behavior or else. She warned her as she helped my sister pick out just the right clothes to get ready. I laid on my bed and wished and dreamed someone would discover me. Tasha is a popular student, a cheerleader, and an up-and-coming model, Mother proudly bragged to Keith as we all sat around the kitchen table. It was a special occasion, and Mother let me in to sit with the family at the kitchen table with the strict orders that I stay silent. I was even allowed to take a bath in the main bathroom. Tasha found a dress that seemed too small and let me dress up. Tasha and I talked about how Tasha didn't really want to go to Hawaii with this stranger and how she was scared that Mother would want her to marry him. "I can't stand that old fat man," she said as she laughed and tied my hair back. We then made up a whole plan. I would look as good as I could, too, so I, too, can get discovered. Then I would go to Hawaii with my sister and also become a top model. Couldn't help but dream of leaving the house as I looked at Keith and tried to get his attention. But alas, he seemed only memorized by my sister. My sister sat quietly with a pink strapless dress that exposed her tan shoulders, her hair pulled back, and Mother placed a pink rose on a hair clip to the side of her hair and added some colored lipstick. "Perfect," Keith continued to agree with Mother's positive remarks about Tasha. "Maybe you wouldn't mind if Tasha and I went to the mountains this weekend to get to know each other. I could take sample photos of her, and you could see the type of work I do. We will have to get a portfolio ready with her with the best photos. She will need to dress casual and pose in plenty of swimsuit shots. I would also recommend lingerie shots. As much as I hate to tell you, all the real supermodels have those type of photos in their portfolios." Mother just smiled and agreed. "Looks like we're going shopping tomorrow, Tasha." My sister looked at me as if somehow I had to save her. "I love shopping. I love photography. I love to travel," I said with my head down, afraid of the rejection. Keith acted as if he hadn't heard a word I had said, and Mother gave me a kick under the table and smirked. "My husband's never home. He works all the time with his business. He's a businessman, you know," said Mother. I could tell Mother wanted to say anything just to change the topic. Tasha looked at me with disappointment on her face, but I knew she had tried to get Keith's. I knew she knew I had tried to get Keith's attention. After dinner, Keith asked Mother to walk him to his car. As they left the house, Tasha fell to the floor and cried. Jeremy, Tasha, and I hugged each other as we all cried. We were siblings who didn't have a chance to see or talk to each other. Mother had managed to isolate us. I believe this was our way to let each other know how much we loved each other before Mother came back into the house. We heard Mother walk back up to the front steps, and then the sound of the doorknob move. We all scattered back to our respective bedrooms. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. It's so good. Like, man, can we just spend an hour hearing the story? I know. Yeah, thank you, Jori. I think that actually brings to mind one of the questions I was going to ask you a little bit later on, but I think is a good one to start with, actually. You know, you grew up in this home with an older sister, and there was, you know, it stood out certainly for me from the very get-go of reading your story how differently you and your sister were treated, particularly by your mother, and that there were often times when you felt responsible for protecting her or your younger brother who came along later, and other children that came through the home. And maybe you can just start by telling us a little bit about, you know, how did you make sense of that, you know, that disparaging difference between you and your sister and how you were treated, and the impact of that on you?
Well, I never have been able to make sense of it. It's one of those things in life that just make no sense, and it happens. And people do repeat that pattern. I do know that I never did feel, everyone who's read the book has told me that I was very protective of my siblings, but I never felt that way. I felt like more or less they were actually protective of me. Later in life, my sister had told me that she would intentionally get my mother's attention, for doing various things to get her away from me because she knew the attention I got, which was much worse than what she had. It was just the pure neglect on my end, and then the pure catering and cooing and just adoring my sister, and we were both sexually abused. But my sister's story, as far as that goes, is hers to say. I can't speak for that, but I do believe that it happened to her as well. In my book, it's clear, and I just write it how I lived it. It was very difficult, but the kind of love I got from my mother was sexual, and I know people find that really shocking. It's not shocking to me. What was shocking to me is later in life to find out that not all mothers do that. My sister's attention from my mother was about her looks and keeping her just perfect and making sure she had the next plastic surgery that came out. She got her breast implants when I think she just turned 16. She didn't want them. She would scream and cry, and my mom made her get them. She wanted her to look her best and to always be tan and have her hair done. And my sister wasn't like that. In real life, she wanted to be a messy, sloppy tomboy. So it was really hard for us.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of what you're bringing out in a really elegant way is the fact that abuse can really come in so many different forms. Having your body manipulated or marginalized or put on a show, right, certainly falls within this category of abuse. And another key thing that I think you're bringing up that doesn't get a lot of attention is the fact that, females can be abusers and are abusers.
Right.
And more often than we think.
I think a lot more often.
Tell us. Yeah.
I actually think it's very common. Last year I had thought of getting foster children, and because I wanted to pay back society for somebody who allowed me in their home when I was about 14. And I read through hundreds of children's profiles and couldn't believe the sexual molestation they have gone through by both parents. So it is very common, but I think the children just don't understand it because your parents actually love you, and that's how they show you they love you. And I don't think the parents think of it as sexual molestation. I think they think that's just how it is, and it's something that repeats until the cycles end. And I just really don't think that I really even thought of it. I never thought of myself as a molested child. I always thought, gross, people who are molested, sick. Those are people who are, those men jumping out of a bush. They're hiding behind a bush to grab some cute little girl. Stranger danger, which is actually completely false. I mean, it's really easy for even your own personal self to turn a blind eye on the situation. But looking back, I read the book and I think, how did I write this? How did I write this book? I can't even imagine how I did it, or how I was able to get the words out. I have a really hard time opening it and reading it myself.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And one of the things that you mentioned is that, you experienced abuse by both your mother and your father. And just from our conversations that to some extent the abuse from your mother seemed harder or more difficult or worse in some ways. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, why that was?
Well, with my father, it was just a known fact. He was just this alcoholic who would spend all his money at bars, getting drunk, and buying everybody rounds of drinks, and then coming home with no money. And we were very poor because of his alcoholic issues, which is pretty typical in these situations I have found. So my father would take me out and panhandle, and we would just constantly go out panhandling and dumpster diving, and that was actually enjoyable for me. Believe it or not, that was something I never knew there was anything wrong with it. Looking back, of course, I think, well, I can't even believe I thought it was okay and fun, but it was just the way it was. And he was definitely mentally disturbed. And my mother had multiple personality disorder. So the hardest part for me with my mother was seeing her so kind and nice to other people, because people loved my mom. They thought she was the most wonderful person. She did all sorts of charitable work. She volunteered for hospice. She would groom dogs for everybody and hardly charge them a penny. And but to my sister and I, she treated us completely different. And it wasn't diagnosed till later in her life that she had multiple personality disorder. She actually had 8 different personalities. And most people don't know that, and it's true. It's in her medical records. And, I think it's actually more common than people may think, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was confusing. It was very confusing. But I did hate my mother.
Yeah.
I loved her and I hated her all in the same time. Mm-hmm. I just craved her affection and her attention, even if it was the negative kind. And I wanted her to love me, and I always just wanted her to love me until the day she died. I wanted her to love me. Like in the introductions of why I named the book Chocolate Flowers, I was begging her, to just say something kind to me, something loving, tell me you're proud of me. But she never, ever could. In the last year we had Christmas, I had brought over a stainless steel microwave to match her new appliances. I would always try to buy her love by buying her things and taking her nice gifts or helping her clean the house. She had all sorts of gifts in her family room for all her friends' children and the neighborhood kids. And I came over with my 3 children thinking, oh, this is great. She finally has gifts for us. And she had to scatter back to the back room to find this bowl with holes in it. It was from a thrift store. It said $3.99 on the bottom, and she just handed it to me and said, well, here's your family gift. I didn't get anything for you guys. I didn't have time. I didn't know what to get you. It was just like that. It was always like that. It was always very disappointing. Yeah. And then for us to sit there and watch her friends bring their children over and open all these lavish gifts, it was very confusing. Those things are not in the book. I could probably have made the book twice as long, but I really didn't feel it necessary. Yeah. I wanted to make the point about the sexual molestation because nice people do molest children, and that's actually how they get away with it, and that's actually why they're not believed.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a really very important point, and something that I'm sure our listeners and many of them can relate to is the difficulty of trying to reconcile this person is somebody who's supposed to be taking care of me and to some extent actually is, right? There's a roof over your head or there's food on the table or, those sorts of things. Or maybe they are really kind and fun and carefree at times. And then there's also the piece where you're being abused. And
exactly, and it's very confusing.
Conflict.
Because I do read books about child abuse, and these are people who have had no, nice home to live in. And I think, okay, well, I had that. I had a nice bed and I had a nice room. I didn't have hardly any toys, but, I did have that. I had shelter, so I couldn't have been abused. My mom didn't beat me. My dad didn't beat me. I mean, I guess in a way they kind of did in different ways, but not like in these books where they take out the belt and just slap you to death. I wasn't beaten. I don't have all these bruises all over my body. Who am I to say my abuse that I had as a child is any worse than anyone else's? It's just different. And the reason I wrote the book was because it's just different. And I felt like, it's not like the other books. It's just the perspective that I had from having parents that were mentally ill and having to deal with it.
Yeah.
And what happened to me because of it,
Yeah, for sure. And that to me is the other piece of your story that I think is so important and that we don't often hear much about is when we have a parent who's an alcoholic or has a mental disorder, all of the different layers and problems that come into play. I know, in reading the book, throughout the book, there were moments where you were really having to be the caretaker. You had to almost be the one holding this family together and making sure your brother was safe, sometimes taking care of your mother. Yeah.
Now, my brother was very young when all this took place. He was 8 years younger than me, so his memories was, of a pretty happy childhood. And although he has a lot of issues in his own life that I think are because he hasn't really sat and dealt with this. I don't think he realizes what my sister and I went through. I know he had his issues as well, but they were very different. And I don't think any of his issues were sexual. And I know for a fact my stepfather never laid a hand on me. He was very neglectful and couldn't handle kids. He couldn't handle the noise. He didn't have the patience for us. So we were always, of course, in our room all the time, but especially when he was home, we were to be silent and in our rooms, even my sister and brother. So it was kind of strange, but he worked all the time, and he had no idea of the kind of abuse that my mom, supposedly my mother, had with us. I think he was aware, but I think he just didn't say anything, or he would work more so he wouldn't have to deal with it. I'm not really quite sure, but
got it. Yeah, so there's all these components, and then you tell the story of this outside person with your sister. Yeah. Who ends up taking her and holding her hostage and raping her.
Yes.
Yeah. So that, in many ways, it's that that kind of strange neglect, and your mom not really creating that safe container for you guys in many ways. Yeah. What did you want to say about that?
Well, there was nothing safe or stable about our upbringing. It just was what it was. My mom had a lot of emotional issues from her own childhood. I would constantly have to sit in the bathroom while she took a bath, and she would go on and on and on about her childhood. And with her childhood, the excuses that she would tell us over and over were that her mother would have her be sexually active with men, lots of men. And her mother would actually take money from men for allowing her daughter to be sexually active with them so that her mother in turn could buy furniture. But they were also on welfare and constantly were moving and traveling. And, it was very disturbing for my mother to have to go through all that. And so in turn, that was her sexual experience as a young adult, and that was her first the first thing that she thinks of, when as an adult, and I think this is the same way with men, I think that because you were sexually abused as a child, that's something that you actually continue on. And I think that for her, when and sorry, but I'm just assuming this, I'm not a doctor or anything, but I think that for her to become sexually aroused, she had to have children, because that was how it was when she was young with her mother, and she repeated the cycle.
You bring
really
up a very
me.
Exactly. I mean, it's what you were saying here about. Well, I was shocked and surprised when I found out that not all mothers and daughters got on that way. That when it's almost becomes normalized, abuse almost becomes normalized. That it's very hard to kind of step outside of that and break that cycle. Certainly, if you don't have resources or interventions or any guidance and support, then it's very easy to just kind of pass that along. And
and I think the other thing about the book is that it's not just about molest. It's about the psychological abuse. Because my mother had multiple personality disorder, to the outside world, she was wonderful taking care of animals. There were many times where she'd bring home stray animals, and everyone thought she was this person who would rescue these stray animals and give them homes, when she would have me assist her in drowning them in our bathtub. And it was really hard for me. It was never easy. I would cry and beg her to stop, but she was playing a part that she felt she was helping these pets. And, there was a time where my sister and I were in our rooms, and she called us out to the kitchen table, and she was really excited. She was always in her room, depressed, reading books about, her next illness and trying to diagnose herself, because there was something wrong with her that clearly was not diagnosed at that time, which was her mental illness. But she was, trying to find reasons for this, I believe. Yeah. And one time when she called us out of our rooms, she was so happy, and we were so excited. She had told us that, she kept having these reoccurring dreams that she woke up at night, got butcher knives, and stabbed us to death in our sleep. And she was so excited to tell us that we were going to get locks on our doors that day for our protection, and we were going to have a new, fresh start. We didn't have to worry about that if she did come to our rooms, because our doors would be locked. And then she proceeded to tell us there was a war in another country. She turned on our little TV with the knobs back then, and she said, and I want you to know not to worry because it's not in our country. But if it is, I have a plan. I'm going to poison your food, and that way you won't wake up, and you'll never know. And we were scared because she said, now eat your food. And she started slapping the table. And we looked over and we had these tuna fish sandwiches, and they looked beautiful with lettuce and tomato. And I was starving, so I was happy to eat it. And my sister was crying because she thought she was going to die. She thought there was a war and my mom was going to poison us. But then she looked up on the counter and started screaming at my mom, you know, you're giving us cat food. There was a can of cat food on the counter. And I looked up, and my mom ordered me to keep eating. My sister ran to the bathroom. And I guess we were eating cat food sandwiches, and my mom was just giggling, thought it was the most funniest thing to force us to eat these cat food sandwiches, and proceeded to tell me, you know, now you know what I have to do. I have to volunteer for a hospice. And there was this woman who couldn't take care of her cat. So I told her, I know a place where there's fields and creeks and streams and rainbows and all kinds of cats roam around. She said, heaven, and she's dancing around, and my sister's in the bathroom screaming, there's another dead cat. You know, it was just constant chaos. And the rest of the world didn't see that.
Yeah.
But, you know, we did, and it was very disturbing. And I never really even realized how bad things were until I did write the book. And I recently got a letter from a woman who I call an aunt, but she's not actually an aunt. She's my mom's friend. And most of my childhood, she lived in another country. But she did write me a letter that told me that my childhood was good. She read my book, and she loved it, but she thought that it could never have been my childhood because my childhood was wonderful. And I got so excited thinking, oh, good, I hallucinated the whole thing. It's not, you know, it's not my childhood. My childhood was fine. I actually got excited. And then I started thinking, you're right. My mom did bring me to parks, and then I started remembering, no, she dropped me off at parks and left me at parks and had errands to run. And there were parks. There was this one park where it was, she told me not to go down the slide because there were razor blades and I would cut my head, so I wouldn't go in the slide, so I would sit by her. And then there was this Big Bertha park, and it had this big shed, like a big tool shed. And she said, you don't want to go away from your play because you see that blood on it. I guess it was red paint, and I thought it was blood. She said, Big Bertha likes to take children and kill them. She likes to torture them in there, so stay by me. So I never played at parks, hardly ever. I was afraid because my mom would make up these stories, and I would be terrified to leave her sight, you know. So, or she would just knock us off and forget about us for the day, you know. So it was just, was there structure? And I just don't believe my mom learned parenting skills. And I'm not bashing her with my book. I love my mom. I wish she was different, and I wish she got the help she deserved. But I was actually told by another aunt, well, why did you wait till she died to write your book? That's horrible. Well, first of all, I started writing it before she died. We talked about it, and I would talk to my mom about these things. When my mom was dying from cancer, I sat there for almost a year and visited her like once a month, and I would talk to her about what I was writing. So she knew about it. And then as far as my dad goes, he's still alive, and he just tells me he thinks it's great and he hopes my life's better. So, I mean, you know, you're doomed if you do and you're doomed if you don't. You know, there's no right answer for that. Why did you wait till they died question? You know, my grandma told me, wait till your dad dies.
Can I hop in here just a second? Yeah. I want to just ask you a quick question, if you don't mind, because it's really bringing something up for me that I think a lot of people go through and experience is, you know, whether we tell our story by telling people in our family, telling friends, or whether we, you know, do something a bit more public, write a book or become an advocate, do a blog, start a Facebook group. There's always, you know, this the issue that we face, and we have to, you know, we give thought to well, how are other people going to react? What are friends going to say? What's the family going to say? Am I going to be believed, or am I going to be ostracized? And I know, you know, when you decided to write Chocolate Flowers that you had to kind of think about and deal with those fears. So what I'd really love to know is, you know, how did you navigate that? What questions did you ask yourself, or what things did you do in order to get to the place where you were able to write and share your story, and how have you dealt with maybe some of the responses that you've gotten from people?
Well, writing the story wasn't actually a choice. I honestly would put it off, not wanting to write it. I don't feel like I'm an author. I don't feel like I wanted to put this out for the negative attention. I don't believe there's any money to be made. As a matter of fact, it cost me thousands of dollars to produce. But the reason I wrote the book was for my own mental health, as far as my own well-being. After years of putting everything that I have gone through behind me, and moving on, I had married the man of my dreams, and we had a child together. And I finally had the family I always wanted. And it took me by surprise one day when somebody in his family, an adult male man, had made a sexual move on me. And honestly, it shocked me, and I was surprised and scared and hurt, and I thought only my parents did that. I didn't realize that there were so many people out there that could do that or capable of that, and I was extremely disappointed, and I moved away, and he did it again. He pushed himself up against me and rubbed on me, and so I told people in the family, and I wasn't believed. I was told that I must have misunderstood it and that I was just causing problems. And I was told, basically, don't come to our homes anymore. You're causing problems in the family. You're a troublemaker. And so I decided to leave my husband, and I was extremely suicidal over this whole thing. It had opened Pandora's box for me. So I was doing extremely well in real estate. I had just sold 44 homes, so it was definitely not for the money, or that some relatives claim that they think that I did it for, but it was because I was going to write the book and end my life. I wrote suicide letters to my children, and I sat down and I wrote the book. And to write the book, I actually would sit, and I'd have to do it during my menstrual cycle, because if I did it any other time, I would actually have my period because it was so disturbing to write. I would just light a candle, in which I actually have a lit candle here as I speak to you, and I did a prayer before I spoke to you, and that's what I would do. Each time I would write chapters, I would do the sign of the cross, and I'd pray to God to guide me and to do this for the right reasons, not to hurt anybody, but because it's something I had to do. And it was almost like an outer body disassociation for me when I wrote the book, because I wouldn't remember even writing it. It would just come so natural. It was so easy to write. And even giving it to my editor, she would say, wow, you have a natural act for telling a story. You have this God-given talent. And I'm thinking, I didn't want to do this. It's something I had to do. So what other people thought never came into my mind, because, first of all, I really don't have very much family I speak to anymore. I don't have very many friends, and the friends I do know, they know this, a lot of this past I had, or they know that I've said things like my parents are weird or my parents are different. I think they get it now. They kind of put two and two together. And as far as those aunts and uncles and all those people who popped up in my life all of a sudden, I didn't really know them before this, and I don't plan on knowing them after. And I'm really sorry for them. I understand that they'd like to think that it didn't happen. I don't blame them for not understanding or knowing or seeing the signs. It's okay if they think I'm mentally ill and I made this all up in my head, like a figment of my imagination, or that I'm a hypochondriac. I don't care what they think. It's their problem, not mine.
Right. Yeah, what I really draw from that and kind of hear ringing through in that, which is something I often work with my clients, is, being able to stand in your truth, being able to stand in your experience and be confident in that reality, and getting to that place where, what your experience was, and regardless of what other people say or other people do, that you can remain grounded in that. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it is one of those things that we always cross that bridge as if we've experienced an abuse or a trauma. At some point, this question is going to come up: do I tell? Do I not tell? Do I talk about it? Even if it's only with just a close friend. And so the more we can be, sure of ourselves in that moment, then regardless of what kind of response or reaction we get, we can kind of stay safe in that. I wanted to go back to something here. We briefly touched on your birth father, who was also abusive. And when the book starts, it's right out the gate. I mean, you do not get to take a breath before we are in your life and in the things that are happening that are abusive, and then also as an adult woman preparing for your wedding and having your father come to the wedding. And that was something I was super curious about when I was reading the book, was like, God, how did you get to that point of inviting him and having him there as a part of it?
When I married my second husband, we had this. He comes from an old Portuguese family with a huge family of very religious Catholic background, and I had gone through the whole RCIA program, and they annulled my previous wedding to my previous husband, and we planned this huge wedding, but I really had no one to invite. The main people I was inviting was my stepfather and his side of the family, and my husband that I was marrying, my fiance, had this great idea of inviting my real father too. And to be honest with you, I invited him thinking he wouldn't show up, because he never showed up for anything. I hadn't seen him in 10 years, and I thought, I would give him the opportunity to come. And any time I was with him, I'd always be very nervous, and I can't talk, and I really can't touch him, and I just get these twitches all over my body. It's like I'm very nervous. I didn't really think twice about inviting him. I didn't want to invite him, but I felt like I almost had to. And so when he had showed up at the rehearsal dinner, he was actually sober, and I thought maybe he had changed. I was really happy to see him and happy to see he seemed okay. But the next day, when all the bridesmaids had left me alone in the bride room, and the photographer walked in and said, "Your father's here. He wants to spend some time with you," I froze. And he walks in 6'4" and just stares right at my breasts and goes straight towards my chest. And I just stood there and scared and shocked, and I never said a word. I just sat there and just cried, and until the photographer opened the door and saw him. He was still, caressing my breasts and going on and on about how great my implants looked, because I had gotten some implants. And she was just, her chin dropped, and she couldn't believe it, and she kept mouthing, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And I was like, he's not going to touch me again. I'm never going to see him again. I just, I was so upset. And then here I am about to walk down the aisle with both fathers, my stepfather and my father. And I had, my stepfather had seen me and took me into a little closet area, and I told him what happened, and he had told me, you don't have to see him anymore. This is the best day of the rest of your life. You could start over. So
yeah,
it was hard.
Wow,
it was real
Jori.
hard. Every time I've seen my dad, I never realized how bizarre it was that he would call me, and he would call me sexually, and I would finally, it got to the point where caller ID came up. I'd see it was him, and I would tell my kids, "Don't answer the phone, it's him." He'd call over and over and just talk about sex on the phone. It was disgusting and creepy, but that was just who he was, and it was pretty sad.
It is, and it's so tough, because one of the things that I'm such a strong advocate for and really hope for when it comes to my clients is that there can be reconciliation between the abusers and the abused, and that parents, they're your parents at the end of the day, and so we hope that can happen, but there are also instances where it's just impossible. Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's where I'm going, is that there are times and places where...
Yeah.
Hold on. I got you going. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's thought.
Yeah, no, and fair enough,
creepy.
Because I think it's right that we have to find that safe space and that balance for ourselves, and we have to be okay with, as heartbreaking as it might be sometimes, that some relationships that can't be repaired and can't be restored, and to not blame ourselves and to not feel guilty about that or put pressure on ourselves that there should be some way and that we have to do it because there are certainly times, especially if the person is continuing to be abusive, that, you put yourself first and you set those boundaries, and you have the right to do that, and you deserve to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
okay, now you can go.
My real father with my own children. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him to molest whoever. It makes me sick that he still walks around, in San Francisco. And, my grandmother died not long ago, and I had I don't know why, but we went and picked him up, and I told my husband, I'm sitting in the back seat, you sit in the front. If you see his hand reach back to me, you tell him no. The whole time I just ignored him. I couldn't even talk to him. And, he started telling me how he goes to this donut shop, because the people there let their 4-year-old daughter sit on his lap. And I thought, oh, my gosh, but who do you call to turn these people in when that's all you have, and he's probably fondling her and God knows what. But people need to open their eyes. If you're going to let some man hold your daughter, there has to be a reason he wants to hold her, and clearly, for my dad, it would be for sexual reasons. So it makes me sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I could never.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid choice. And so, whenever possible, I think it's also a valid option for people to reconcile, and it is possible. There's the two sides of the coin. Some people are like, oh, you should never, ever, ever talk to this person again. And I think there are opportunities, and I've certainly seen it with my clients where, they've been able to recover those relationships, and it's awesome. And then there are also times when it's not an option, and we have to be really honest with ourselves and protective when it comes to, navigating those waters. I know that I know we're starting to kind of get on the other side of our time together tonight, but before we run out of time, I'd really like it if you talk with us a little bit about the moment that your son disclosed that he was being abused. I remember, when I read that section of the book, I was shocked at your first reaction of not being able to hear him,
Yeah.
And it really caught me off guard, to be honest. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, how's that
It made you
happen?
hate me, huh?
And
like, how dare her?
No.
I did that on purpose
because it wasn't hate. It was curiosity. It was humanity, number one. And mostly just curiosity. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that experience from you and what that journey was like for you.
That journey was the worst nightmare of my entire life. I would say that being raised by mentally ill parents was a cakewalk next to what I had to deal with my own son. And that is when his father had died in a car accident before he was even born, he never met his father. And so I had this brilliant idea to get this man who I had trusted and enjoyed and liked and thought he was funny and nice looking and kind and considerate and went to our church. I allowed him to babysit my son and help me with my son. And I thought that God sent him to me because he was just so wonderful. I had him on a pedestal. So when my son came to me and told me that this person was making him suck his penis, I didn't believe him. And I know a lot of people find that shocking, but to be honest with you, how many of us go to people and tell them what happened to us and they say the person didn't believe them? That was me. I didn't believe him because that doesn't happen to boys. And I told him that person would never do those things. He helps me so much, I don't know what I would do without him. Some time had passed, and my son had to go to the bathroom and was screaming on the toilet. So I took him to the emergency room, and after I had disciplined him and everything else for lying, and found out he had sexually transmitted disease. And my heart sank, and I never got so depressed in my life because I got it. Like, it all hit me at once, that he had tried to tell me and that I didn't listen. And how many of us do that and or are not believed? And then, if it wasn't for him getting this, would I have ever believed him? Probably not. Would I have ever protected him? Probably not, because I didn't think that person was capable of it. I really didn't think that would happen, especially to a boy. Boys don't get molested, especially from men. That just doesn't happen. Girls are the only ones who get molested. Not true at all. And I think more and more men are coming out saying that that's happened to them. But But one of the best things that also happened out of this, if anything good could happen, it was the fact that I had learned so much from my son. He actually taught me when I told him to be quiet about it when we moved to another town and we changed our names, and I told him to be quiet, never to discuss it again. You know, there was a day where he was in his room and I was outside picking flowers and gardening, and a bunch of boys came walking up the street and asked for him by his last name, and I got scared and went and got him, and he trotted off down the street with him, came back, went in his room, and after the boys left, I went in there and said, well, what did those boys want? I knew they were up to no good, and he said, they wanted to know if I was gay. I said, why would they ask you if you're gay? He said, because in high school today, he was in high school, he said there was this thing on the auditorium that they were talking about stranger danger, sexual abuse, molest, things like that, and they asked if anyone wanted to share their story. So he got up on stage and told the gruesome details of what happened to him by this person. And to be honest with you, I was so scared that the kids were going to ridicule him or tease him or harass him about it, but the opposite happened. And he became very popular, best friends with the Valedictorian, captain of the football team, started running track. He just ran the Ironman and finished it. I mean, he got his master's degree. He has excelled in everything because he didn't hold it inside. He didn't allow that depression to keep him hostage like a prisoner. He spoke about it, and he's always been told after that day and after we realized how important it was to talk about it. So I was very appreciative to learn from my own son. He means the world to me. All my kids mean the world to me, but especially what he's gone through and how he's come through with this it's just remarkable to see all he's accomplished.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, yeah. It's profoundly inspiring. And you know, Jori, I just want to take a moment here because you know what always happens to me on these shows is in the last 2 minutes I go, oh my gosh, I have to say everything all of a sudden. So I'm going to make sure I say this now so I don't forget and it doesn't get the due time and space that it deserves. I just want to thank you. I really want to acknowledge you because that is badass, what you just did.
Thank you.
It really is. Not everyone can come and speak about this sort of experience and to be as...
Well, I'll tell you what. You tell those people who can't speak, it feels great.
Oh, nice.
It is the most wonderful feeling on earth to get your story out and to talk about it. And if people don't like it, you could just stick up your middle finger and tell them where to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. And there's lots of love coming your way in the chat room as well. And yeah, I mean, it really takes something, you know, it takes something for all of us, and it's in looking at those hard places and those hard corners, and then the more, you know, we acknowledge, the more we heal. It's when we try to tuck things away and push them away that they just compound and get worse and worse over time. So I certainly know that your sharing tonight is healing people who are listening and emboldening them, I hope, to share their story and to be able to talk about their experiences. So you've gone on this journey now.
When you talk about it, you know, when you talk about what happened to you in your past, you're going to be amazed how many people have a story too. Yeah, the Me Too Club. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, certainly when I work with my clients, we go through a whole section about how do you tell your story in a way that's empowering and emboldening. And what do you do? Because once you start telling your story, yeah, definitely people are going to open up. It's very much a giving of a gift to other people when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, that others then feel a little safer and capable of doing the same. And so I want to, for people who are listening, the name of Jori's book is Chocolate Flowers, and I really want to encourage you to head on over to Amazon and pick up this book. I also want to encourage you to pay attention to the blog for the next coming weeks because Jori's going to continue sharing her story and writing about her experience and excerpts from the book
over these next 3 weeks. So you want to definitely tune in for that and stay updated. Jori, how else can people get in touch with you and learn more about what you're up to?
That is a good question because, to be honest with you, I'm a business person and all I do is sell real estate day, night. And I'm a mother and a wife, and I'm a busy person. And to be honest with you, the book was just a healing thing for the depression and suicidal feelings I had. And I never really did a whole lot to promote it. So I'm learning to blog today, thanks to you. And I'm going to be building a website. But right now I primarily am on Facebook. There is a Chocolate Flowers page. There's also a closed group for people who need to talk about things that you can't openly discuss. So Jori Nunes on Facebook or Chocolate Flowers on Facebook. And you could always message me.
Perfect.
But I'm working on it. I'm actually trying to get the book in Barnes & Noble and some other places. So it's just a slow process because this wasn't something I planned on being alive to do, and I am. So.
Right. And
so, thank you.
And now that you're on, yeah, of course. So no, I love it. And if you have any questions about how to get in touch with her, you can certainly email me, coach@rachelgrantcoaching.com. And I'll get you connected, or if you're not able to find the book or any of the resources, just reach out to me and I'll make sure you get what you need, because this book it's not an easy read, but it's a profound one, and it will certainly take you on a journey, and you will learn something about yourself from reading it. And Jori, I guess I really want to know, what did you learn about yourself? What from just going through that experience and coming out on the other side of writing your story?
It was the most amazing emotional journey I'd ever had in my life, writing that book. I really wish that I had known about blogging while I was writing it, and I could write about the emotional roller coaster of reliving every single thing, and also the interviews with pedophiles and victims of crime. I mean, that part alone was quite the journey, and it's very healing. It was not healing for me after I wrote the book until I actually held it in my hand. My husband took me to dinner, and I took the book out and I held it, and I cried from every pore of my body. And I haven't hit premenopause or anything like that before, but I was sweating and crying like waterfalls, and I just felt this relief of all the depression and anger. And my anger is gone. That angry little girl who used to lash out at everybody, she's gone. And that's the most amazing part about telling the story and writing it, was that I am not an angry, bitter person. I get frustrated because of my lack of education at times, but the anger is gone, and I'm healed, and I do forgive everybody who's done anything to me. But at the same time, I want people to understand it so they don't have to go through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you're certainly accomplishing that and are making a big difference in the lives of each person that you touch, and that's the most important thing. Yeah. So we have just roughly about 5 minutes left. So if you have a question or a comment for Jori, let me know. You can call 347-215-7754 and press 1 to speak with us. Or if you're in the chat room and you have a specific question that you'd like to ask, you can certainly put it there. So you're living your life. Tell us about life now. What does life look like for you today?
Well, the biggest accomplishment and the best thing that's ever happened since my mom had passed away was the relationship with my stepfather and I. That has improved drastically. I never got to know him. He just thought of me as this snotty stepdaughter who would, just lash out at my mother and try to, hurt her, as I got older. He never knew why I was so angry. And being able to talk to him about these things, being able to talk to him about the book and my life, and having him tell me how wonderful he thinks I've become and how wonderful I am, that means the world to me. He's the only parent who's given me that. Even with all the relatives calling him and emailing him, he still stands by my side unconditionally, and that's my dad. That is the parent I have, period. I don't have a mom and dad. I don't feel like I ever really did. But I do have the stepfather who's just terrific. So that's the best part.
That's
and
awesome.
I am married. My husband and I are back together. We did separate for the year that I wrote the book because of everything that happened with someone in his family. We're working on our relationship. It's doing really well. All three of my children are amazing, brilliant, wonderful kids who I tell every day how much I love them, whenever I talk to them at least. And I try really hard to listen to them. My listening skills aren't the greatest, but I try to block out everything else in life and really pay attention when they talk to me, because that's so needed and something that we don't really learn when we're not given that.
I hear that. That's awesome. Well, I'm excited for you and happy for you, and I'm really looking forward to your upcoming blog series as well. I think that's going to be a nice follow-on to our conversation tonight. So for everyone listening, do come and check the blog. You can find that by going to my website, rachelgrantcoaching.com. Click on resources and then blog. So, Jori, I just want to take a moment to really thank you for coming on today and for sharing your story so boldly, so openly, and really just being courageous. If you want to contact Jori directly, you're welcome. You can reach her at jorirealty@gmail.com. That's JORIREALTY @gmail.com.
I had the greatest idea when I got my email to put an extra R in there, and now I have to explain it. So it's JORIREALTY
Oh, you're right. I totally
@gmail. Right. Isn't that stupid? I don't know. I just thought it was so smart. It's one of those things.
Make sure everybody pauses and really pays attention. I like that. Like, are you really looking at? I wasn't. Go. And let's see. There are a couple of people who have quick questions, so we'll try to grab one quick question. We'll see if we can do it. We have 3 minutes, so make it really quick. It's going to be 4271. Give it just a second to connect. Okay, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah. Hi.
My question is, being on both ends as a parent and a child that dealt with abuse, were you able to better connect with your child? I am the parent of a child that suffered abuse, but I never suffered abuse. And I feel like there's a disconnect between me and her in me trying to help her get through this.
Oh, what an uncomfortable topic that is, and I'm so sorry that she went through that, and I hate to push my book on you to read it, but I think it really does open your eyes with what I had to deal with my son. And although you have a daughter, I had a son, I feel like the damage is equal, regardless of the sex. But the best thing I did for my son was I had his back, and I made sure we pressed charges against the guy. I know he didn't want to, as a parent, you don't want your child to sit in court. And we had to stay in court for quite a long time. And back then, he'd have to stare at the man who molested him and talk about all the things he did. And it was so horrible. But at the same time, that was his justice. And that was the way he was able to put the guy in prison and say, you hurt me, and be able to see him get taken away in handcuffs. I really feel like pressing charges is the most important thing. Seeing a psychologist is also important, and always listening to her and never telling her to not talk about it or to forget about it, because forgetting about it and not talking about it is the worst thing we could do to our kids. They have to be able to talk about it to heal.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. We had a great victory in court. The person that hurt her is been sentenced to 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yay. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really hard. I just think it's an emotional roller coaster.
I have to jump in. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have to jump in. He does it every time. 50 seconds. They're like 50 seconds. We have so much to say. Oh, my gosh. If you have questions for Jori, please email her. Follow us on the blog. Hit her up on Facebook. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any other questions that you might have. And I am as well. And so I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions tonight. But, Jori, you were really amazing. I really appreciate you being on tonight. Folks, remember to visit me at rachelgrantcoaching.com to check out other resources that are there. And I have an upcoming teleseminar on April 23rd, so you can certainly get in on that and learn a little bit more about the 3 stages of recovery from abuse. So you can go to the website and resources, news, and events to look for more information about that. So thank you so much, Jori. You've been wonderful. And everybody, take good care of you, and we'll see you second Tuesday.
Thank you.